Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling what's honestly one of the ultimate food contradictions in modern nutrition. We're talking about a compound that's in practically everything we eat, yet somehow it's found itself right at the center of this massive dietary tug of war. So, we're going to unpack the science, take a look at the very real defenses plants use to survive, and figure out the actual nutritional reality behind what's on your plate. Let's get into it. Toxic anti-nutrient or healthy staple? That right there is the core question driving this huge, sweeping debate right now about lectin-rich foods. And we're talking about everyday items here, legumes, grains, nightshade vegetables. The big question is, are they secretly poisoning us from the inside out, or are they actually the essential foundation of a long, healthy life? It's pretty rare to see a food group so aggressively polarized, which is exactly why we need to just look strictly at the evidence. Section 1. The Great Lectin Debate. So we have two very different camps established right now. On one side, certain highly popular diets label lectins as dangerous anti-nutrients. They argue that these compounds are inherently damaging to the human body. But while on the flip side, traditional nutritional science views them quite differently. Historically, they've seen the foods that contain lectins as absolutely vital to human health. So it's this massive clash between a modern wellness trend and established dietary guidelines. To truly understand this fear, we need to look impartially at what the anti-lectin movement is actually claiming. According to their perspective, consuming these proteins leads to a pretty severe cascade of bodily issues. They suggest lectins cause a condition known as leaky gut, drive systemic inflammation throughout the entire body, trigger complex autoimmune issues, and even promote stubborn weight gain. It's a really serious list of allegations. And frankly, if you read this list without any context, it's pretty easy to see why people are literally clearing out their pantries. Okay, let's dive into this. What is a lectin exactly? Well, scientifically speaking, a lectin is simply a type of protein that has a very specific trait. It binds to carbohydrates. That's really its defining characteristic. And it's crucial to understand that these aren't rare anomalies. They're actually found in virtually all plants and animals. But the reason we're talking about them today is that they are highly concentrated in very specific foods. We're talking particularly about your legumes, your grains, and your nightshade veggies like tomatoes and eggplants. Section 2. Nature's Plant Defense Mechanism. Think about it from the plant's perspective for just a second. Plants have a major evolutionary challenge, right? They're literally rooted in place. They can't run away. So to ensure their species survives, they produce lectins to act as this sort of built-in biological armor. By lacing their seeds and leaves with these proteins, they make themselves fundamentally harder to digest. It's brilliant, really. It deters insects and foraging animals from just eating them into extinction. It's basically evolutionary warfare at a microscopic level. Which, of course, brings us to the human digestion issue. When we consume these plant defenses, they interact with our digestive tract in a very specific mechanical way. Because they're designed by nature to be super tough and resilient, lectins resist being broken down by our harsh stomach acid and our digestive enzymes. And surviving that highly acidic environment allows them to pass right through and literally bind to the lining of the gut. This physical binding, that is the exact mechanical reason behind those health concerns we discussed earlier. Section 3. The raw lectin danger. Now, what's really interesting about this compound is this specific biological term right here, phytohemagglutinin. Yeah, it's a total mouthful, but it is incredibly important. This is a highly toxic lectin found abundantly in raw kidney beans. Actually, it's the absolute perfect example of nature's biological armor operating at its most potent level. Eating just a few completely raw kidney beans causes severe food poisoning. We're talking about intense, immediate symptoms here: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, the whole shebang. If you don't prepare these beans properly, they are genuinely scientifically toxic to humans. And emphasizing this is absolutely crucial because it completely validates the core premise of the anti-nutrient movement. In their totally raw, natural state, high lectin foods can absolutely be a danger to human biology, for sure. Section 4. The reality of cooking. But here's the thing. Virtually no one eats raw kidney beans. Just like no one sits down to a big bowl of dry, crunchy, uncooked rice, right? The practical reality of our daily diets radically contrasts with the raw danger of these plants. You see, the anti-lectin argument often focuses so intensely on the chemical danger of the raw plant in a vacuum, but it entirely misses the crucial context of human culinary history and, well, basic food preparation. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how we solve the lectin problem through simple, ancient steps. We're talking boiling, baking, sprouting, or fermenting. Using a pressure cooker or even just giving your beans a simple, thorough boiling completely breaks down and deactivates the vast majority of lectins. We systematically render this toxic biological armor totally harmless just by, cooking our food properly. The heat fundamentally changes the structure of the protein, meaning it physically can no longer bind to your gut. Let's move to Section 5, the nutritional reality. So see how this builds? The science really points to a very clear conclusion here. Unless you have a specific diagnosed sensitivity or an autoimmune condition that a medical professional has confirmed responds well to an elimination diet, cutting out lectins entirely might actually do way more harm than good. For the vast majority of the general population, navigating the grocery store with the deep fear of cooked lectins is just completely unnecessary. And to really prove that point, just think about the globally recognized dietary patterns that doctors and researchers have praised for decades. High lectin foods, like lentils, beans, whole grains, and nuts, they are the absolute foundation of some of the healthiest diets in the entire world. Take the Mediterranean diet, for example. It's famous for promoting longevity and heart health, and it relies heavily on these exact ingredients. I mean, if we give in to the internet fear and cut these items out of our meals, just look at what we're missing. These foods are dense nutritional powerhouses. They're absolutely packed with fiber and prebiotics that literally feed your gut microbiome, keeping your digestion happy and healthy. They deliver fantastic plant-based proteins and complex carbohydrates for that sustained, jitter-free energy we all want. Plus, they are loaded with antioxidants and essential vitamins. By fearing the deactivated lectin, you're basically throwing away all of this incredible, life-sustaining nutrition. So the crucial point is this quote right here. For the general population, the nutritional benefits of eating cooked, lectin-rich foods vastly outweigh the theoretical risks. It really is that simple. Traditional cooking methods neutralize the theoretical threat entirely while leaving all those amazing, absolutely necessary health benefits completely intact for your body to absorb. Which kind of leaves us with this thought to ponder. If a simple cooking pot fundamentally disarms nature's formidable biological armor, what other dietary fears out there dominating our social media feeds are actually just a matter of proper preparation? If you've been navigating autoimmune wellness circles lately, you've almost certainly heard the buzz around lectins. They're often painted as this ultimate dietary villain, especially for rheumatoid arthritis. We're going to look strictly at what the science actually says. We'll separate the fact from the fiction and give you a super practical, actionable guide for managing your diet. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to unpack the popular lectin theory, contrast that with actual scientific research, and explore why blanket dietary restrictions can sometimes backfire. Then we'll equip you with a concrete toolkit featuring the cooked-only rule and a customized symptom tracking method. Let's dive right in. Part 1. The lectin theory explained, and understanding the leaky gut connection. To kick things off, let's look at why the lectin-free diet is such a massive talking point right now. Proponents suggest that these plant proteins play a starring role in triggering or worsening autoimmune flares. And the theory of how this happens relies on a 3-step chain reaction. First up is gut binding. Because lectins naturally resist digestion, the idea is that they survive the stomach and literally bind directly to the carbohydrate molecules lining your small intestine. Second, this binding theoretically damages the tight junctions of your intestinal wall. It creates a state of increased intestinal permeability, which you probably heard called leaky gut. Finally, we hit step 3, molecular mimicry. If these undigested lectins slip through that damaged barrier and cross into your bloodstream, your immune system suddenly flags them as foreign invaders. And here's the kicker. Because some of the proteins in your own joints structurally resemble these plant proteins, your confused immune system might actually attack its own tissues. That's what theoretically leads to the joint inflammation we see in rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, it sounds incredibly logical, right? But let's look a little bit closer. Moving to Section 2, science versus test tubes, or what the research actually says. While that concept of molecular mimicry makes total sense on paper, the scientific consensus currently views it with a whole lot of caution. Why? Well, because those scary results linking lectins to severe gut damage largely come from test tubes and animal models using massive, massive quantities of isolated raw lectins. I mean, unless you're snacking on handfuls of raw, uncooked kidney beans, which, let's be real, absolutely nobody does, these lab conditions just don't reflect human reality. There is a glaring lack of high-quality clinical trials proving that eliminating cooked lectins actually improves RA symptoms in humans. We aren't eating isolated raw extracts in a lab, we're eating normal, prepared meals. Which brings us to part 3, the restriction backfire, and why a blanket ban is a double-edged sword. Look, if you're managing rheumatoid arthritis, we know your absolute top priority is managing inflammation. But completely cutting out all high lectin foods, like legumes, whole grains, and nightshades like tomatoes and eggplants, is a major double-edged sword. When you cut out beans and grains entirely, you strip a massive amount of dietary fiber from your plate. And your body desperately needs that fiber to create short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs. These are incredibly important compounds, like butyrate, that are produced when your healthy gut bacteria ferment dietary fiber. Here is the absolute key point. SCFAs are scientifically proven to reduce systemic inflammation and help regulate your immune system. So if you lose the fiber, you lose the SCFAs. You're actually making it much harder to manage your RA inflammation naturally. Not to mention, severely restricting your diet puts you at a real risk of nutritional deficiencies, meaning you miss out on essential vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that support your joint health. In fact, it's pretty ironic that the diets with the strongest track record in the scientific literature for successfully managing RA actually include the exact foods a lectin-free diet tells you to ban. The Mediterranean diet is a perfect example of this. It's highly regarded as a proven anti-inflammatory approach, and it actively incorporates moderate amounts of well-cooked legumes and whole grains, perfectly balanced with healthy fats like omega-3s and olive oil. You see, it's all about balance, not blanket restriction. Let's move to Section 4, the cooked-only rule, a pragmatic approach to food preparation. So instead of these extreme restrictions, let's pivot to a really pragmatic strategy. The golden rule here is beautifully simple. Never eat undercooked legumes or grains, period. The issue isn't necessarily the food itself, it's how the food is prepared. As we talked about earlier, the terrifying data on lectins comes from raw, isolated proteins. But standard cooking methods physically change the structure of the food. Heat and water break down lectin proteins, completely destroying almost all of the active lectins and leaving behind only harmless trace amounts. These trace amounts are rarely enough to trigger any sort of systemic immune response in an average person. Cooking literally changes everything. Okay, so how do we cook them right? If you love beans, lentils, and whole grains, you do not need to fear them. You just need to prepare them using these safe methods: soaking, boiling, pressure cooking, and fermenting. Pressure cooking in particular is an absolute game changer for anyone concerned about lectins. It's incredibly efficient at breaking down lectin proteins rapidly thanks to that high heat and pressure. By simply soaking your beans overnight, tossing out that soaking water, and throwing them into a pressure cooker, you ensure your food is perfectly safe, delicious, and absolutely packed with the fiber your gut needs to fight inflammation. And finally, Section 5. Tracking your symptoms and finding what uniquely works for your body. Living with RA means acknowledging that food sensitivities are incredibly individualized. What works great for one person might cause a massive flare in another. So instead of broadly assuming all lectins are the culprit behind your discomfort, you need to become a detective of your own biology. You can use this structured 4-step method to keep a really useful symptom journal. Step 1. Eat the suspect food, say a serving of lentils or some tomatoes. Step 2, wait 24 to 48 hours. Now this part is absolutely crucial because autoimmune and inflammatory responses to food are rarely instantaneous. They take time to process through your gut and bloodstream. Step 3, check for pain spikes. Are your joints suddenly stiffer? Is the swelling worse than usual? Jot all of this down in your journal. And finally, step 4, consult a professional. If you notice a consistent pattern where your joint pain spikes a day or two after eating a specific food, take that journal straight to your doctor or a registered dietitian. Together, you can safely design a temporary structured elimination diet, completely avoiding the risk of those nutritional deficiencies we talked about earlier. So the ultimate question we're left with is this: what anti-inflammatory approach is going to work best for your unique body? The science tells us it's rarely an extreme, all or nothing ban on healthy foods. So grab a journal, start tracking your individual responses, embrace the absolute power of the pressure cooker, and take active control of your health journey. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking great questions, keep thoroughly cooking those beans, and I'll see you next time as we continue to unpack the science of our world.